All right, everyone. Today, we're going to be doing a slightly different type of episode. We're going to be discussing pump and dumps, and we're going to be looking at it through the lens of gambling, but not at Vegas, more like cryptocurrencies. We're going to try to look at the nuance here and explore just kind of a framework for this, because to be honest, in our community, even in the financial independence community, we're seeing a lot of people just have questions. And this is a conversation that's very important. So let's just take a look at it and just create a framework for this conversation. Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is Choose FI.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, guys, very excited to spend a whole episode dedicated to cryptocurrencies. And to help me with this, I have my good friend Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I am doing quite well. And yeah, like you said, there's it's been a weird week here. So we're recording this on May the 13th. And yeah, there was, I guess, a cyber attack on a pipeline that brings gasoline basically to the whole U.S. East Coast. And it's been an interesting week in terms of watching human psychology and watching scarcity and shortages and or even just the appearance of shortages and how people react. But yeah, it's been, you think back to like, at least my parents talking about like the gas shortages. I don't even know when it was, frankly, it's 1970s or some such. And like, it's hard to relate to that, but there is this deeply unsettling feeling in your gut where you're like, wow, I don't know if I'm going to run out of gas. I don't know what if this lasted not for 5 days, but for 5 weeks? What do we do? Then do we contemplate like, oh, that trip we took to the restaurant that was 20 miles round trip? Well, damn, that was 4% of our gas reserves. Like you start thinking about all these wacky things. And like, I mean, that's one of the fortunate parts about living in the US. Like we don't want for anything, right? Like we never experience scarcity. And it's an interesting feeling when you're presented with it for the first time.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. And I guess of the, as I think about the Choose FI team, the only person I know with extra gallons of gasoline just ready to go is Ed. And it's because for the longest time, Ed was optimizing credit rewards points and everything else. And one of the freebies that he was able to get as a result of this process was like virtually unlimited gasoline at Kroger as long as he picked it up within a window. But I'm pretty sure in Ed's case, he was not going to Kroger to get his unlimited gasoline supplies using plastic bags, which is like pure Darwinianism here. Like, it's just what is going on that in 2021, people do not realize that you should not be storing gasoline in plastic bag. Have you not seen these videos?
Wait, is this a thing?
This is a thing. I have seen multiple videos now of people parked in front of Wawa's filling up 5-gallon trash bags of gasoline. And as it leaks out of the first one, trying to put it in the second. I'm not making this up. So we're going to dedicate this episode to other types of pump crisis, a pump and dumps. But I'm just saying, if that was you or you know anyone, let's stop and do a public service announcement. Please only use regulated gasoline cans for storing gasoline. And if you're going to do that, you should also be aware that gasoline does go off after a period of time. So there are probably some strategies there for storing gasoline. There's a good way to do it and a bad way to do it. And I've seen a lot of examples of the bad way recently. It's very disheartening for humanity.
Yeah, and I guess not only that, but
you're
I'm
literally
sure,
speechless. You're like, I don't know where to take this next.
Yeah, I did not see that coming, Jonathan. I can usually see where you're going, and then I'm sure there are many people who are listening to this saying, don't hoard gas, right? Like that's like exactly the wrong thing to do. But on a very personal level, this is what's so interesting about decisions, right? Like there's the micro decision, there's the macro decision. On a micro level, if you have a gas can and you're at the gas station and you fear that there's some shortage, of course you're going to fill that up. You don't think about the macro, but right on the macro level, you hear all, the officials and people who work in the gasoline industry, et cetera, saying like, there's no shortage. It's just that the demand has jumped up dramatically in a very short period of time. So like, again, I don't ever like judge, people and their decisions. Like, I think every decision is complicated. Do you think about the micro yourself? I think most of us do. I think that's just the way that it works. But, obviously on a macro level, it does lead to these inevitable consequences, which are today, as of right at this moment, or at least a couple hours ago, 52% of gas stations in the state of Virginia are completely out of gas. It's crazy. So we could probably talk about this one little random anecdote for 20 minutes, but it is interesting, that interplay between personal decisions and macro societal decisions.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if there's any other points to layer onto that, because we saw a version of this last year with toilet paper last March, and a lot of us went out and got a bidet after that. It said, nope, not going to be in this situation again. Not necessarily ever going to unpack the bidet, but if it ever comes to that, it's going to be there, ready to go. And this time around, we're looking at it through the lens of gasoline. And it struck me like when we get little alerts like this, it gives us an opportunity to make connections faster than other people and to be prepared ahead of time. So for instance, when you get the alert that something's happened with, a gas line, the media hasn't necessarily made the connection yet and isn't publicly saying all the gas stations are going to have a problem. But, there's some sort of supply chain issue with gas. Let's fill up our cars. That way we don't spend the whole day in line with everybody else filling up our cars. And then we can then also be prepared to say, all right, so for this period of time, can we scale back our driving? We don't need to go try and fill up every canister around the block and fill up that old, container that's buried in the ground that we were trying to figure out how to get pulled out. But we could say, could we scale back our usage? And could we also be prepared before everybody else is, getting in line for hours and hours and hours and hours? And so now, we're at home and we have scaled back our driving dramatically and we're good to go. So I do think there is, you want to be positioned where you need to be ahead of the masses generally. And if the masses are being informed by the news, then you can make these interpretations faster and you can get to that place better. So, and it's kind of like everything else we talk about, Brad. Like, you don't want to be doing something at the exact same time as everybody else. You want to have made your moves ahead of time.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go with that, Jonathan. I'm sitting here with a huge smile on my face. Like, that is FI thinking. Like, I think that's part of what we do here, right? Is we try to see trends. We try to think long term. We try to think outside the box. How many times have we talked about just like, hey, there are these societal things, like on a macro level of we all buy McMansions and buy the most expensive cars we can and spend every dollar, down to the micro of, going out to eat on Mother's Day or Father's Day, let's say. I'll make it personal for me. Like, I don't want to go out to eat on Father's Day because it's a mob scene. They usually cut the menu, increase the prices, and it sounds miserable. Or for us, like going to the pool, we love our summer pool, obviously, that's well documented here. Like, we go basically more than anybody out of the 400 families at that pool, but we will not be caught dead there on July 4th and the Member Appreciation Day because it's horrible. You have to wait. You can't get a seat. It's just like, it's a disaster. So for me, it's like, hold on, you wanted to jump in.
I just wanted to say the word frolic in a sentence. I haven't said, we are there to frolic, not to wait in lines.
It's exactly. So are these little decisions going to like change our lives dramatically that we didn't go on July 4th? Like, no, obviously not. But it's just like the way that we have decided to kind of live our lives in terms of like, just think a little bit differently. Does that mean like, are we depriving ourselves of going on July 4th? Would we have fun because everybody we know is there? Like, yeah, I guess maybe on some level, but like, I don't want to have to line up at 10 a.m., to get a seat when the pool opens at noon or whatever it may be, so like, I think that is just kind of what we talk about here, just in the FI community generally, is like, see the field, right? Like, understand how things work and have that knowledge, have that broad diversity of knowledge that like you can then apply from my stupid, ridiculous situations here, examples of like the pool and Father's Day meals, or Mother's Day meals is probably more apropos, but to something macro, right? To like your financial future. See the field, understand what works for you. What decision is going to benefit you in the long term, not just, oh, that's what everybody else does, or that's the most popular this and that. Like, no, like we have the space to step back and say, maybe I want to do it a little bit differently. So yeah, I find that very empowering.
So, if we were to actually make this transition and talk about, cryptocurrencies in general, it is actually kind of funny that funny, not funny, but this company Colonial that had this pipeline, they were hacked via ransomware. So we will give you access to your database back in exchange for an amount of money. And I just saw confirmation via Twitter here. I guess that's a legitimate way of getting these confirmations.
Is that confirmation?
Yeah, that they paid the ransom. It was a $5 million ransom, which in the scheme of things doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it was held ransom. That's not ideal. They paid a ransom of $5 million in Bitcoin, which actually sets us up in an interesting way because the price of Bitcoin on the day of this recording, we're recording this on a Thursday, it was worth 10 to 15% more yesterday before Elon Musk decided that they're no longer going to accept Bitcoin for purchases of Teslas. And when he announced that, also via Twitter, his preferred platform, Bitcoin and basically the associated crypto market fell by anywhere from 7 to 15, 20%, depending on the coin, maybe somewhere far more than that. But it basically, my point was a tweet from Elon Musk, the Doge father, massively moved the market. When we're talking about billions of valuation that just disappeared. And as we start thinking about cryptocurrencies generally, I just wanted to point out that crypto in general, whether you're talking about Elon Musk or like just in general, any crypto that he's not associated with, they are incredibly volatile. And I have been seeing, and I have experienced to some degree on my own, stories of insane levels of return, absolutely mind-boggling levels of return that you can get. And I think there is a sense in this community, am I missing out because I haven't gotten, a 1,000% return on my money yet, or a 300% money? Like, it seems like everybody's making money. Am I missing out on this? And I think we should just explore this just a little bit further to kind of understand generally what's happening here, what we should be aware of, and then where this should fit in our plans to financial independence, if it should fit at all. Because even if you have already made that decision one way or the other, there's plenty of other people that are now interacting with cryptos or hearing about them for the first time that are trying to figure out, what is their role in my path to financial independence. So, Brad, I think that is a valuable place to start the conversation. And clearly, we framed the episode around pump and dump. We're going to spend some time there. But I think let's just first talk about cryptocurrencies, your perception of them. Is this a core tenet to reach financial independence? Is that you need to have some skin in the crypto game, in crypto? Or is there another way of thinking about this?
Yeah, that's a multi-layered question there, Jonathan. And I don't think there's an easy answer to it. We have probably talked about crypto maybe 3 or 4 times in 460 odd episodes. So this is clearly not something that we focus on, I think, for a very long time. We both have been just very anti. And, a lot of that, I remember, what did we have an episode in 2017 at the height of the craziness with Bitcoin there. And, and this ties into the pump and dump is, and we'll define that in a couple of minutes, certainly. But a lot of it has always, to me, just felt like just pure speculation. These things were made up out of thin air, and people are trying to basically sell them to the next guy, right? There are early adopters. There are people who have, I guess, captured the vast majority of the market of these things. And then they just trade hands. And you're always hoping, like, this is the definition, basically. The loose definition of speculation is you're hoping to sell this to some other sucker for more money than you bought it for. And I think we are very susceptible to speculation generally. Jonathan, how many times have I said, like, my biggest financial mistake was real estate speculation? I did this and I paid for it basically for 15 years. Like, this was a catastrophic mistake. So nobody is above falling prey to this. Not that I'm some paragon of virtue by any means. I don't mean to set myself up that that if I could fall for it, no, hardly. But we all are susceptible to this. So I think how most people have looked at cryptocurrency for the last handful of years is, wow, I heard somebody made a lot of money on this. And what does that mean? They bought it low, they sold it high to some other sucker, and they didn't do anything with it. It just kind of sat there. And that next person isn't going to do anything with it. It's just going to sit there until they hopefully can find some other sucker to pay more for it. In the cases of random things like this Dogecoin, who the heck knows what's going to happen, right? Like, it could plummet to virtually zero. It could just keep on going up because you find more and more suckers. So that's been my historical view, I guess, on this. I have to say, and I have said here on the podcast and in my bi-weekly newsletter, is I am still leery generally of most cryptocurrencies themselves, but I am much more interested in this entire sphere. So I think there's a lot of really, really interesting innovation going on with decentralized finance, with potential like smart contracts and NFTs, which, you hear a lot of in terms of like these ridiculous, like, oh, Beeple sold random art that he made for $69 million. And to most of us, that sounds insane. That sounds absolutely insane. It sounds like more of this speculative nonsense. But I think there's going to be real world applications for it that are hard to foresee right now. But if you kind of extend, see the field again, Jonathan, right? That's a phrase I used earlier. I think there's world changing potential here. And that's the part that I'm interested in. So like, I am never set in my ways about anything. Like I try to just be open-minded. I try to learn new things, and I try to be completely honest to myself and here publicly when I've changed my mind on things. And I have definitely changed my mind on the fact that I think there's world-changing potential. But at this point, I'm not smart enough or knowledgeable enough to know what that looks like. I can't necessarily pick a particular company or a particular cryptocurrency, but I think it's worth learning about. So anyway, that's a very, very long-winded way of saying that, that's kind of like my thoughts on crypto generally, where I've been, where I'm going.
Yeah. And I think as we kind of explore this a little bit further, I've tried to figure out, what would be a way to approach this that gives people just kind of a sense for parameter without getting in too much of the specifics of necessarily any particular one. Because at the end of this, I don't want you to come away with this is like the crypto that ChooseFI recommends or anything like, or that ChooseFI hates all cryptos, but just have, an appreciation for the terminology or what drives the price on some of these. And we'll pull some examples as we're able to, just to kind of help you understand that. So I just wanted to point out, let's talk about Bitcoin and Dogecoin just for a second here, because these I think are gobbling up most of the oxygen in the room currently in the crypto space. And then we'll kind of move our way down from there. So Bitcoin, generally seems to be the first one that got mass adoption. It is the one that is the most visible. It's the one that has a CNN ticker. It's the one that everyone seems to talk about. It is by far the most valuable on a per coin basis, where each coin right now, it fluctuates, but at the time of this recording, it's worth anywhere from $40,000 a coin to $50,000 or $60,000 a coin. That just kind of seems to be the range that it's sitting in. It was only a year or so ago that it was down to about $13K or maybe as low as $6,000. So it has nearly 10x'd over the last year. What I wanted to point out, though, is that is not even close to the highest, percentage return in the crypto space. There are some coins that have 10,000x'd in that same interim of time. So it's really important for us to just kind of have a sense. The numbers on these things, in many cases, they don't even make sense. And that's what I really wanted to get to by starting with Bitcoin. Bitcoin at its core is code. It's code. And that code could be good. It could be bad. It could have pros or it could be cons. It could be cloned overnight and altered in some way to add a new feature. And one of the things that you always hear about Bitcoin that people talk about its value is, well, there's only 21 million. There will only ever be 21 million, which is maybe true when you're talking about Bitcoin, but you need to really understand, people need to understand this. They can clone Bitcoin. They have forked Bitcoin many, many times to add new features over the years. And so that whole idea of there only being 21 million is only assuming that 5 or 6 or 10 years from now, Bitcoin is the one that we're still talking about. So we can make a coin. You could make a coin in one day and have it overnight. You could have 1 billion coins and say there will only be 1 billion coins. You could pick the features you want. It's code. There's nothing magical about it. So why is Bitcoin worth $60,000 a coin or $40,000 a coin when Dogecoin is worth 7 cents a coin, 70 cents a coin, or some random third-party one that I don't even know. Literally, there's over 7,000 and counting every single day. It's probably closer to 10 at the time, 10,000 different cryptos, all with unique things. And some of them are priced 0.00001 cents per coin. You can still get in early. You can still, now imagine if it goes from 0.000.
And you're saying that facetiously.
Yes, I hope it comes through. It's still early on those. What if it went to $1 and went from 0.00001 cents to $1? You could make 110,000 quadrillion percentage return. All you need to do is to figure out which one's going to go from 0.0001 cent to $1. It's easy. Except that it's obviously not. I just want to point out to people, because it's really important. Some have done really well and some have done insane, but we don't know which ones are ours. We're looking back with the benefit of hindsight, which is why it's really important for us to understand what are the different parameters that drive the value of a coin generally, and then really understand what a pump is and how that can run in parallel and how that can also affect the price. So Brad, that was just kind of a general framework. Any general thoughts on that? And then I'll kind of throw a couple terms out there for you to react to as well.
No, I mean, that was a pretty good starting place for sure. And I think we should also, because you asked me this before and I didn't necessarily answer it directly in terms of comparing and contrasting it with traditional investing that we would consider, right?
Yeah.
That the FI community generally focuses on. So I think, looking at, what does investing look like? Right? If we had Warren Buffett here, how would he describe investing? Because I think that's generally how we in the FI community look at long-term thinking.
Well, I actually would push that back on you. Let me give you my beta version. And then you are a huge Warren Buffett fan. I'd be curious for your, kind of Warren Buffett-esque version answer of that. So investing for me is I am buying an asset that has a known value and produces a return of some anticipated regular amount over a period of time. You could talk about P/E ratios. You could talk about expected return. You could talk about growth. We could talk about fundamentals, what they're doing, utility, all of these different things. Those might go into it. But investing for me is there's fundamentals that I'm looking at, and I'm looking at the past, but based on the past, I'm projecting forward that it will continue to do this or a version of this over time. So that's investing for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty darn close to what I would say. And I'll actually use some Warren Buffett quotes here around gold, which I think is actually quite interesting and pertinent to the current conversation, because a lot of people who are very pro Bitcoin believe it is digital gold. So yeah, Warren Buffett, this was way back in 2009, but basically he was asked, where do you think gold will be in 5 years? And should that be a part of value investing? And so Warren, and this is a quote, he said, I have no views as to where it will be. But the one thing I can tell you is it won't do anything between now and then except look at you. It'll basically just sit there. Whereas, Coca-Cola will be making money. And I think Wells Fargo will be making a lot of money. And there will be a lot. And it's a lot better to have a goose that keeps laying eggs than a goose that just sits there and eats insurance and storage and a few things like that. And he continued and said, you could take all the gold that's ever been mined and it would fill a cube 67 feet in each direction. For what it's worth at current gold prices, you could buy not some, but all of the farmland in the United States. Plus, you could buy 10 ExxonMobils, plus have $1 trillion of walking around money. Or you could have a big cube of metal. Which would you take? Which is going to produce more value. So I think that is just such an all-time classic quote. I love, Jonathan, I've probably said that maybe 5 times on the podcast, but I love that because, that looks at investing as Warren Buffett and many long-term investors and value investors certainly look at things, which is, what does this produce? What's going to be the income that comes back to me, the cash flow? What's the appreciation on this? So I think it's looking at it, and we've seen that in terms of real estate. Again, I'll throw it right back on me and how stupid I was. My real estate speculation was basically the definition, which is I bought something and I anticipated selling it real quick to someone else for more money. That's ridiculous. Whereas we have been educated by people from Bigger Pockets and Paula Pant and Chad Carson, Rich Carey, about what does real estate investing as a business look like, right? It means factoring in zero appreciation and just looking at it as a business. What are my income? What's my expenses? And do I have positive income there, right? That's a business. So anyway, this is just kind of setting up the difference between, as I see it, investment and speculation. And now this is not to say that, Jonathan, you talked right about it, throwing around a couple $100 in Dogecoin and making a couple $1,000, but you didn't look at that as an investment. You looked at it as gambling, right? Which is perfectly fine.
Yeah. And we'll make that transition. I think that's the perfect point. I actually wanted to, you pointed it out perfectly. Talking about gold actually does give us a bridge here to look at. And also to point out that we're not all going to agree. Even at the end of this conversation, we're not going to all agree. Brad and I don't always agree. We're directionally following the same path, and we know what our goals are, and we understand our why. Our actual execution doesn't always look one-to-one. So that's why we're just presenting this conversation. And, to Warren Buffett's, his point about gold, all completely true. Yet at the same point, I am personally, and I think many other investors are, very sympathetic to the idea that gold, while it does not produce a return, and this is fundamental for why we're going to talk about digital currencies, it acts as an potentially excellent store of value. This term is the first term that we're going to start with, a store of value. And what do we mean by that? Well, gold is worth in dollars much more today than it was in 1900, in 1902, in 1920, in 1930. Why? It is because, not because gold has become more valuable, because gold is just gold, but the dollar has lost its value over time due to just inflation. And we see inflation of 2 to 3% a year. That's real. Over time, 2 to 3% a year depreciates the dollar. So now if you were trading between whatever the value of gold was, let's say the value of gold, it would cost you like 20 or 30 bucks an ounce back in, the 1920s. I don't actually have these numbers in front of me, but that's probably in the wheelhouse. Now that same ounce of gold would cost you $2,000, $1,500, something in that range. Why is that? Is gold more valuable? Well, maybe, but probably a better way of saying gold has held its value and the dollar has lost its value over time. This is the argument that people in the digital currency space use to justify, in particular, things like Bitcoin. It's going to be an excellent store of value. Why is the dollar worth less over time? It's because new dollars have been added to the monetary supply over time, right? There's more dollars in the pie than there were before. So each dollar is potentially worth a little bit less. And so the argument for something like Bitcoin is there's only 21 million Bitcoin. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. So it's almost deflationary in nature. So it will act as a great store of value. So as people want more and more of these with potentially dollars that are worth a little bit less, over a 10-year period of time than they are now, then the price of Bitcoin can only go up. That's just the case they're using. And they're borrowing that from look at gold. Look at what gold has done. But Bitcoin is a lot easier to use. It's a lot easier to transfer. It has, and this is the next term that we're going to talk about, it has more utility. It can be used for more things. It can be used more quickly. It has more liquidity. So it has more utility and it's easier to access and to transfer from one party to another than gold. If I want to give you my bar of gold, we've got to meet in person for that transaction. With Bitcoin, I can transmit it to you in a different zip code, in a different state, in a different country. So it's got advantages over gold while still preserving its store of value.
Yeah, and I am definitely sympathetic to that line of reasoning for Bitcoin. The 21 million, I mean, when you think about it, with 7 or 8 billion people on this planet, 21 million of anything is just a tiny, tiny, tiny amount. So, I mean, that, whether you think it has inherent value or not, is almost beside the point. And this is kind of where I've come down on this, which is I still don't know, how this was necessarily created, how the first 15 or 16 million of them were given out. I guess they were mined technically, and, who's hoarding them, et cetera. But that's almost beside the point, because scarcity is something that runs human emotions just significantly. And I think a lot of people, we have a lot of collective delusions as humans, right? It's like, hey, it's worth something because we think it's worth something. That story, you look at a book like Sapiens, stories are what have kind of helped humans get to the point where we are. Obviously, this is a very deep conversation and not worth it here on this particular episode. But, it has value because people say it has value. And if other people are buying it and there's this tiny little scarcity, like, again, under this line of reasoning, that makes sense to me on some level. And then you get into utility, which, Jonathan, I don't want to preempt you here, but my line of reasoning with Bitcoin is it doesn't do anything. It just sits there. And sure, it's a store of value, but it's only a store of value because we've come up with this story about it. But, I'm seeing like 1 or 2 use cases of it, and it's way, way, way too small to, make any decisions based on, certainly. But again, just like anything in life, if you're set in your ways and you're not open to new information, you're not really going to have a successful life. So like, I am open to the fact that there might be a use case. We actually, our guest, Michael Peterson, on episode 99. So that was the generous giving on the path to FI, and just an incredibly interesting guy. He managed a nonprofit in El Salvador. And what's fascinating is he has started what I believe to be the world's first use case of Bitcoin. Jonathan, I don't even know if you knew this, but it's this beach town in El Salvador. And it's actually they call it Bitcoin Beach.
Huh.
And he's been, featured on a whole bunch of Bitcoin podcasts recently because he has the first use case of this in real life. So now this is one little area in El Salvador, but who knows? If that's something that is real, I'm willing to rethink and my entire stance on this. Like, if this goes from something that's inert and just sits there doing nothing and people only value it because it's scarce to, oh, wow, you mean this cuts down on friction? This cuts down on when people are sending money back from the US to El Salvador, they don't have to pay 30 to 40% in fees, right? And people have to trek to Western Union. Like, this has always been the goal of like what cryptocurrency is generally, is it cuts down on friction. So if Michael Peterson is saying, man, I've seen this work in real life in this village in El Salvador, and it's made a massive positive difference, I'm open-minded enough to say, okay, this is something worth looking into. So again, one tiny, tiny, tiny little example, but interesting nonetheless.
Hey, this is Andrew from the ChooseFI team. I hope you're enjoying the show. We're going to get right back to it after these quick messages.
So one of my goals was to really talk about that relationship between gold and Bitcoin, to highlight it, but then also to now go back the other way and be devil's advocate here. Everybody know, I think people at this point, I have increasingly become sympathetic to the use for gold and silver, precious metals generally over the last 2 years. And I've talked about that on a past episode. And I understand the logic that got us there when we're talking about Bitcoin, but I'm increasingly critical as I see more and more space between those two. So we just talked about it's a store of value because gold plus all these additional features. But I just want to point out, this is all happening in real time now. We have no idea when we look back a few years from now if we will still be able to say that, because again, this is code. The first version of code usually has flaws. When everybody is locking in their 21 million coins with those perceived flaws, and then they clone it or fork it to change the features, et cetera. Now both those assets exist in double, but people are rebuying them. So now we have Bitcoin Lite. There's like 6 different versions of Bitcoin that are existing currently that have been named for different things that we could pull up. And then those were all kind of relatively early on the scene. There are 7,000 additional coins that are, in a best case scenario, looking for opportunities or weaknesses that Bitcoin had. And in a worst case scenario, just exist as low-level clones with no perceivable real advantage. There is no clarity here on if, like, over the long term, if we're talking about 20 years, we have 10 years that says Bitcoin is an amazing store of value. It is a gangbusters store of value. We don't have 40-year data to say that. What if, and we're seeing this now, what did Elon Musk just say? He said, until Bitcoin figures out their energy situation, we can no longer use this to accept payment for Tesla. So a company that just signed on, which I don't know, did they not know this about Bitcoin, that it takes a lot of energy? All of us had heard this. We'd actually talked about it. Like, everybody knew this. So 2 weeks ago, they didn't know it and they thought it was great. I think that's ridiculous, but whatever. This week now they're saying this is such a big problem. We feel like our goal here is to reduce the carbon imprint, and we don't want to use a currency that's adding to the carbon footprint. And the logic behind this, in case for those of you that aren't caught up, is that Bitcoin uses a proof of work concept and uses a mining concept to do these transactions. And apparently all the Bitcoin mining around the world takes up more energy than like the country of Argentina right now. That's a pretty true stat. It used to be Denmark. It's growing. It uses a massive amount of energy. There's other coins that use no energy whatsoever. And Elon Musk says, we're going to look for a cryptocurrency that uses less than 1% of what Bitcoin is using. And there's a lot of those. Look, Blockbuster had tons of utility. It had tons of use case. It had every corner until 1 week later when it didn't. And they couldn't even get people to use their vending machines outside of grocery stores. Netflix was suddenly, it happens that fast. I remember Blockbusters. Brad remembers Blockbusters. We would go in with our allowance and rent our movies every once in a while. A lot of the people listening to this podcast don't. Like, it's just that gone. It's forgotten from memory. You have one store left in Oregon as a token, and someone still has their millions of Bitcoin that they got onto early, but nobody else wants them because they've moved into the next thing. And I'm not saying that's going to happen. It might not. That's not a forecast. It's just saying this is why if you have gold, I think we have hundreds, if not thousands of years of history that say that people are always going to want gold in some capacity. And in fact, the worse things get, the more people want that in general. Kind of the same idea with silver. Precious metals. Do we know that about cryptos? We only have 10 years of data. And so we're going to talk through what are the different features that you generally, maybe make one more compelling than another in a little case. But I just wanted to point out to people, we're not even sure about the store of value use case yet. That argument has not been proved out. We only have 10 years of data and we'll just have to see. So anyways, I think that this is all very timely stuff. This is stuff that's happening out there. And it just gives us a framework to now look at a couple different terms. If we're not just focused on store of value, what are maybe the other things that we're looking at?
Right. And I think it's important to look at, and really why we name this episode Pump and Dump, right? Is maybe more of these things that Elon Musk, I don't know why he's always just smack in the middle of these things. But again, going back to that speculation, right, of this Dogecoin, that's the perfect example. Jonathan, you could probably illuminate us on that. But this seems to be like Elon Musk you would think the guy has something better to do, right? Like he's trying to colonize Mars.
Yeah.
I actually don't understand like the psychology of what's going on in his head, but brilliant guy. You would think he'd have something better to do, but he tweets about Dogecoin and he's the Doge father and it goes up 10, 20%.
Now he's on Saturday Night Live doing it too, man.
Right. And then it drops 30%. It's these ridiculous things. And like, what is Dogecoin? This was something that quite literally, as I understand it, was made as a joke. And yet now I'm looking at coinmarketcap.com, which lists basically the entire global crypto market cap. And the total value of Dogecoin right now is $54 billion. That is craziness. And that's actually down dramatically because it's dropped a whole bunch in the last couple of days. But this was pushing, I think, 70 or 80 billion dollars total of something that basically exists because people are buying it, hoping to sell it to some other sucker, or waiting for Elon to send another tweet. Like that to me isn't an investment at all. And it really kind of undermines, like, if there are people who are true believers in cryptocurrency and the use cases, like I could make a case for some of these things that I'm seeing. Again, like I'm always looking for real life things, like, and I don't want to give advice or certainly investing advice ever, but like I can see real world use cases for some of these, and that interests me. But damn, like I'm not going to buy something and wait for Elon Musk to send a tweet and hope that I can make some money. Like that's just not how I roll at all.
That is the perfect setup. It absolutely is. So last November, I put $150 into Dogecoin when it was 0.009 cents a coin, I think was the actual number. I was like, oh, it's about to break a penny. Let me put $150 in there when it's about to break a penny. And I looked up maybe about, because we just talked about it in this past episodes, I had mentioned it and somebody commented on it, it brought it to my mind. I looked up recently and it was at like 40 cents or 50 cents a coin, something like that. And I said, what is going on? This is a joke coin. Unlike Bitcoin, where like there's a cap on how many can be made, they can print an unlimited amount. They can do, I think there's like 100.
They're doing a good job.
It's like 140 billion right now, something like that. All right, that's one of the cases for Bitcoin is like, because there's only 21 million, then each coin needs to be more valuable. Well, Doge doesn't have that. They can print an unlimited amount. They're at 140 something odd billion. It does use less energy, so it does meet Elon's criteria of using, it's dramatically less energy than Elon, like less than 1% of the energy that Bitcoin uses. So that's worth pointing out. But when he started pumping it, I was like, you know what? Like, and he started pumping it back in November. I was like, he moves markets. I'm going to throw $150 in this and see what happens. And
it 50x.
I made 50x. Like, I saw it was like 5,000. And I was like, this is dumb. They don't even have an active development team, to my knowledge. The entire team has switched over. It has literally no utility at the point that I was looking at it. It's not being used for anything. If someone's willing to pay me $5,000 for what I just put $150 into, and I don't believe in this coin. I just want to be very clear. And it's not in a bad way. I'm just saying when I put $150 in, I put it in because I knew Elon was pumping it. I was gambling. I was not investing. I was going to be okay if it went down. I was not putting life savings. I was not putting serious money into it. I just like, you know what? Elon tends to move things. Let me throw some money in there. But when it hit, to your point, 50x, Brad, I was like, if someone's crazy enough to buy this from me at this price, like, I don't think it's going to 50x again or 100x again. I'm very happy that my, $150, $200 turned into $5,000 or something, some such. I don't think it's going to turn into 65,000. I'm not going to wait around holding my breath for that because, again, you don't make money until you sell. It's theoretical gains. And we just saw you can lose 25% of your value with a tweet. And I don't want to be in this situation. Elon, I'm trying to hold the line, man. I'm here. Take us to the moon, brother. Send us a couple more tweets. And that's your point, Brad. How many people? Someone bought it from me. Someone bought it from me at 50 cents a coin, and maybe they bought mine and a bunch of other people's, and they are like, this is it. This is the one. This is the actual currency that's going to get us to Mars. That's going to be the utility. They bought it from me at this price, maybe, but maybe Elon, tanks it by calling it a hustle on Saturday Night Live, and it goes back down 30%, and that person's money has been cut in half.
Yeah, I think kind of how you looked at this is really maybe like the right way, right? Like you looked at it basically as gambling in a sense, right? Like if you went to a casino and put $150 down on the roulette table on number 7, right? You would get 35 to 1. And that's basically about what happened here, right? Like, did you think for 1 second this was an investment? No. Did you think for 1 second that you could make money? Yeah, you sure did, right? Because who the heck knows what's going to happen? But yeah, I mean, if you're putting your life savings into that, like that seems like a sucker's bet. And this actually kind of ties into real quick, because I think what we're trying to do here also is kind of tie into like general investing and financial concepts, which, for me, a lot of this has to do, we talked about like the amount in the supply. And now I'm likening that to the number of shares outstanding of a company, right? And you can look at, and this is why it's important, like when you own a share of a company, as we've talked about many, many times with J.L. Collins and the Simple Path to Wealth, you own a tiny little piece of that company. You are an owner of that company. That is what owning a share of stock is. You are an owner of that company. Now, if there are 1 billion shares, then if you have 1 share, you own 1/billionth of that company. But think about a company like Berkshire Hathaway, right? That company is worth, and this is back of the envelope, I'm just making this up, but it's close enough. That company is worth somewhere in the vicinity of $500 billion, okay? Now, before they had their B shares, which are the less expensive shares, they had just A shares. And let's say there were only 1 million of those shares, right? Then you just take the $500 billion worth of that company, divide by that million shares, and that you get $500,000 per share, right? That's kind of like the backwards way you would do market cap, I guess. You really would generally take the current selling price, which we'll say is $500,000, times that 1 million outstanding shares to get the total market cap of 500 billion. So I kind of inverted it a little bit, but it's illustrative of how you think about this. And that's actually not all that far off, because I guess basically it's not to get into the weeds of Berkshire Hathaway, but there are those B shares now. So it's fewer than that, I think, in terms of number of A shares, but the numbers aren't all that far off. So think about that, right? Like you own 1 share in my scenario, you own 1 millionth of Berkshire. Whereas if you own 1 share of a company that has 1 billion shares, you own 1 billionth. That is a dramatic 1000x difference. And now, again, when we're talking about these cryptos, when you talk about a Bitcoin, which has that to me is one of the smallest number of supplies of total of 21 million versus Dogecoin, which, as of this moment, Jonathan, you were a little bit over. It's about 130 billion. So, that's a crazy amount of these things. And they just keep on producing them because, as you said, it's computer code, right? And evidently, I don't know anything about this Dogecoin, so excuse my ignorance here, but the way that supply is increasing, it seems like that just keeps on happening. Whereas, the Bitcoin maximalist would say, like, there is a very specific, like, this is written into the code. There's 21 million total. That's going to happen. I don't know what the date is, 2040. And, it's a very precise, these get mined at X number. There's a halvening every 4 years, basically, where the amount you mine is half of that. So anyway, long story short, I'm not a Bitcoin guy, but that's, that's what they would say is like, this is set in stone, or as set in stone as it can be. Obviously you talked about those forks, et cetera, but again, the Bitcoin maximalist would say there's only 21 million. At that point, there's going to be a quadrillion Dogecoin, or something crazy. So yeah, hopefully that was useful in terms of looking at it in terms of regular investing.
I think it layers on the conversation and gives us some context as we really explore pump and dumps. Because that's where we're going with this. Really, I just want to be clear. I don't think Bitcoin is a pump and dump, and I don't think Dogecoin is a pump and dump. But I think they're susceptible to this, and I don't think any coin necessarily has to be a pump and dump to be sucked into a pump and dump, right? No coin is designed, not all coins, I do think some actually, but I don't think all coins are designed that way. Some just get pulled into it, and sometimes it's out of their control, which is why getting a coin, like even a coin that has wonderful features, may not end up being the coin because of how it's handled in the process, which is what makes what we're about to get into really important to understand. So let me add some more context to this. I heard about another coin. So I pulled my profits from Dogecoin. This is my gambling money, right? Gambling money. I have put $150 in. It's $5,000. I sold all of it. I kept $1,500. Rest went back to the bank account, right? $1,500. Rolled that into potentially another coin that you could call a meme coin, et cetera. It's another analog of Dogecoin. It was marketed to be very, very similar, even less known, only 0.0001 cent, whatever. But there's only.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, there's only. It's even more energy efficient. It's running on a secure network, and we're talking about comparing to Dogecoin now on a secure net. And there's only 10 billion lifetime. Look at how much better it is. All the features than Dogecoin. And it
again, layered with sarcasm as much as humanly possible.
Well, at the time I was kind of like, ooh, I could see this. Let's put it here. So yes, I am, with the benefit of hindsight, sarcasm. I put my $1,500 in there. A week later, it had turned into well over $10,000. Well over $10,000. I was like, what is going on? No, wait. All right. I pulled it again and it went up really, really far. And then it came back down to staggering depths. And this is where I'm going with this, because this is really where I realized I'm blindly putting like this gambling money. It's fine. I'm putting it in there, but there is a whole system that I'm seeing replicated over and over and over again. And I need to be able to explain what I'm observing, because I'm watching other people lose their shirts. Because I sold it, someone else bought it, right? And they lost their shirt potentially. And other people, the same idea. And so that's kind of why my heart was here to do this episode. Not because I do not think, just for people, I do not think that I'm a genius at investing. I just think that I don't have any loyalty to any of these coins. And when I make profit, I pull my profit and I get out. I just think of it like, again, and other people have like a belief system around these, and they're getting sucked into FOMO. They're getting sucked into the narrative. And in some cases, if people don't recognize that, they're going to lose their shirt. So, it's really important to understand what's happening. I want to talk now about a pump and dump. We've given you all the terms. You can create a coin yourself. Maybe not you. I couldn't actually do it, but people could create a coin. The ChooseFI token. There's only 10 billion of these lifetime. It's running on a secure network. We're never going to make any more. It's 0.0001 cents right now. Between this community, we'll get them all, and there will be lifetime value here. Make sure you start early. So that's what's happening. Like, a coin is be created for free. Now, what happens at a pump and dump?
That's not happening with ChooseFI.
It's not happening. I'm using it as an example so people see what we will never create this ChooseFI token like this. Okay, it won't happen. But just to be clear, it is happening on all sorts of social media right now. Imagine that it were. In fact, you're right, Brad. I don't even want to tie ChooseFI up in this. Let's go in a different direction here. So there is this. We'll call it Evil Coin. Evil Coin, only 10 billion lifetime, super energy efficient, et cetera. And these two people that created this coin buy up a bunch of them ahead of time, or get them for free because they created the coin.
Yeah, kept them.
Yeah, they kept them. So we keep, of the 10 billion, we hold on to 50% of them, 80% of them, 2 billion. And then what we do is we go get some partners, some friends, and we tell them what we're about to do, and we give them early access, and they buy them for a relatively low amount, 0.00001 cents. And then we layer that on with a couple influencers. And then we go get a Discord channel or a Twitter feed or whatever. We stand up a website and we start pumping it. We build the hype. We start pumping this everywhere. Buy it at 0.001 cents. So all these people buy it at 0.001 cents who take the early number, who find out about this early, take action on it. They buy it, and this thing starts shooting up. Because keep in mind, 8 billion of these are off the table. The people that created the coin have it. So we're watching what we have for free go through the roof. The early individuals that we told about it, the friends, the cohorts, they're making a crap ton of money. The early adopters are making way, way less than us, but they're making great money. And this thing suddenly goes 100, 1000x. Everybody believes the narrative now. Everybody believes the narrative. And now people are FOMOing in. So you're getting it at 0.001 cent. You're already getting after 10,000% return has been locked in for everybody else. And you're buying it there thinking that that's going to happen again and again and again. But what you don't realize is that the people that founded the coin and the whales that got in early, they're selling out slowly. They're deleveraging their position. So what you end up seeing when they start to do that is a slight pullback, but nobody's telling you that a sell is happening. They're all saying, look, it's a pullback. This is a retracement. It's a cup and handle. This is your chance to get it back because we're going to the moon. And people FOMO all their extra money in because they believe the narrative, they believe the story, and then the rug gets pulled. Because no one ever believed in the coin. No one ever believed in the utility. They were just there for the speculative return. And they're going to pull out, and then the rug gets pulled. And somebody bought it. The point there is somebody bought it at the top, believing the story. Those people lose their shirts. They lose their life savings. They are the ones that got sucked into the emotional story. And now they're pleading, Elon, send another tweet. Elon, we need you to do a tweet. Can you guys pump this again? Can you push it? But the whales have already pulled their money out, let this coin die. They cloned it and they started again with a different website and a different coin because, again, it's free to make a coin. You can do this in overnight, and it's happening over and over and over again. Those people may have made $600,000 profit, $1 million profit, whatever, just with this. It's a scam at that point, right? That's assuming they actually made the coin. They actually did it. That's the worst case scenario. But this is a continuum. You could have a situation where you have a great coin that these individuals didn't make it, but they knew the market cap was small enough, or there wasn't, they could control the market. They had most of the coins in their disposal. They could change the price at whim by doing this. And you could have a great coin that gets pulled into a pump, and then the dump is out of their control. And when that happens, then people actually sour on that coin because they associate that coin with losing all of their money. So even a good coin that's doing all the things right, if they get pulled into this, could end up suffering this fate. And so, Brad, to the point on why did I pull, my money out of this other crap coin that I threw it in, I was able to look up and I was able to find out that, I'd thrown my gambling money in there. It had done really well, but I found out that like 80% of this coin was in 2 addresses. 80% of this coin, so 8 billion of the 10 billion that were out there, were being held in 2 addresses. And that means that you have a whale just waiting to pull the rug out from under you, right? In my mind, it's wait. And I was like, nope, that doesn't make any sense. I hope people understand this. This is not bragging. And I think there's people that made a crazy amount of money, but it's letting you know that you can and will lose your shirt if you're just seeing a tweet about something. You are the last one to see it. You are not the founder. You are not the friends. You are not the early adopters of the whales. You are the person that got caught up on a Twitter trending feed. Sorry, that one almost broke me. You're the sucker at the poker table. Yeah.
Right. Like they are looking to use you as prey. And yeah, you never, ever, ever want to be in a position like that. I think that is so antithetical to how we think in terms of the FI community. So, Jonathan, obviously, right. Like, I'm sure you're thrilled that you made $10,000 on this, gambling, and that's wonderful. Like, is that replicable? Is that even like desirable to be replicable? I would say no, certainly. Like, if you see another thing that you could throw $100 into, are you going to do it? Yeah, you may, but you're going in with the mindset that, this is purely gambling for all those reasons you said. And
well, Brad, if you went to Vegas and you won $40,000 at Vegas, would you then go home and tell your friends and family that if they want to get to financial independence, they should just go play the poker game that you played?
It's so easy.
It's so easy.
It's so easy. It's a guaranteed victory.
Just know when to pull your chips, man. You got to know when to fold them.
Right. But, does, gambling for fun, does entertainment have a place in everybody's life? Yeah. It may, no matter how you look at that. Like, I don't look down on people that go gambling at, the local casino. Like, clearly many millions of people get in trouble with gambling. We're not advocating, getting into issues. Clearly that's a significant issue for many people. For Jonathan, you and I, if we walked into our, we went to Atlantic City or something and walked in there with $150 for a night or a weekend of entertainment, like, okay, that's kind of fun. But we're walking in there knowing that there's a high likelihood we're walking out with zero, right? Like odds are pretty damn good that we're walking out of there with zero. And if you chalk that up as, okay, that's an entertainment loss, then great. There's a small chance you could walk out of there with $40,000, but damn if that isn't a really, really, really small chance. So, long story short of like, I think this was valuable. I think it was valuable to look at like, what are these things? What are the pump and dumps? Where do normal people fit into this? Jonathan, you certainly educated me because this is not something that I've looked into. And this is not to paint a broad brush against, like I said earlier, this new world that's coming out, this, cryptocurrency generally. Like I suspect very strongly 10, 15, 20 years from now, we're going to look back and there will be a couple of winners. There will be new technology that has changed the world dramatically. And I implore everyone listening to educate yourself. I think that is what we do in the FI community really well, is we understand things do change. And what's the best way to steel yourself, not against that, but just to prepare yourself, is to educate yourself, right? And that doesn't mean go in and spend a lot of money and spread it across 4,000 cryptocurrencies. Clearly not advocating that, but educate yourself. There is world-changing stuff going on. I am not smart enough to know what that's going to be or what that's going to look like. Like, could I have predicted, I don't know, we think of winning companies now, right? Like, could I have predicted that Netflix was going to take over the world when it was created? No, I couldn't have. But in hindsight, it looks pretty darn obvious, right? And it clearly did change the world. Airbnb changed the world. Uber changed the world. Like, all of these things, like, I strongly suspect there are comparable things that are being created right now in this world of blockchain and smart contracts and NFTs. And like, we're going to look back on many things, like going to a concert or a sporting event and imagining walking in there with a paper ticket will be laughable when they're going to come up with some type of one-of-a-kind NFT for that game that you're going to be able to keep and cherish forever. That first concert you went to. Maybe, for me, it was, I forget, Billy Joel or Green Day or Pearl Jam or some such back in the day. And, what if I had something that was like a digital reminder of that was one of 20,000 from the Nassau Coliseum? Like, that would be pretty cool. Like, I suspect there's going to be crazy stuff like that. Again, I just don't know enough to foresee what that's going to be. So, it's hard to predict. But like I said, I'm trying to educate myself as much as possible.
And that was really the goal here, is just to kind of allow people to think through some of these terms and why they're important. And we talked about a couple: store of value. We talked about market cap. We talked about utility. And I think, to kind of to frame that up as we kind of wrap this episode, we've said this before, but I think it's really important. You can be speculating, but speculation can be a continuum, right? This can be a little bit of a gamble. It could be a high risk, speculation, but you could have varying levels of confidence. And you should look at the blanket crypto market and say some are just jokes and others might be a gamble. They might be high risk, but there's also a lot of potential return here. And so kind of as I look at all of those and just think about, I just want to give you some terms that I just kind of consider. I think largely the store of value, for that to be a true statement, coins that don't just mine to infinity and beyond are more attractive. So like Bitcoin has that, right? 21 is the cap. So over time, we're not going to have, 200 billion. So like Dogecoin, to me, that makes me a little uncomfortable that they can just make more, at a whim. Doesn't necessarily mean they will. They have their own incentives to make the coin stronger by not printing too quickly, but they effectively can. But I really like the idea of, coins that have a pre-mined amount, which almost by definition gets rid of a lot of it reduces the energy cost that we're seeing where, as you keep mining the additional amounts, it gets more and more energy dense to actually do that. So I like coins that already have a pre-mined amount, which a lot of these newer coins have. I like coins that are marketed as being more energy efficient. And I like to see coins that have a lot of partnerships, a lot of utility. Are they being used? I like coins that play nice with banks and with anti-laundering laws and anti-terrorism laws, et cetera, ones that work inside regulation. This is not why the original crypto market was created. It was to exist outside of regulations. It was privacy coins. It was, we don't want the government to have it. But I believe the ones that exist in the future are going to be ones that are highly regulated. Call me crazy, but that seems to be a trend. So just as you start to think through that, how is it going to play in a future where regulations are coming? If pump and dumps end up becoming something that's costing a lot of people a lot of money, there are going to be crackdowns worldwide to prevent people from losing their shirts. There's going to be regulations, and the coins that survive that are going to be ones that are highly regulated. That's just my opinion, but it would be the way that I would look at the crypto market. And then the utility, if you're going to have any hope of it not being just a pure speculative gamble, it has to be built on utility. And when you start, all coins start with zero utility. Utility is something that's earned over time through relationships and partnerships. It's just an idea originally to allow international remittance payments because people are paying insane fees to send money back home to family via Western Union or MoneyGram. But if you have a coin that has a steady price, it's stable, it's not as volatile, it has increasing number of users, that are getting added to on a regular basis. And you've got a company that has a political presence that's able to get relationships with companies like MoneyGram and Visa and Swift and all these big companies. Now you're talking about real utility. And now you're like, okay, I could actually see you bridge the gap. So, there are coins that have made it farther down that pathway than others. Nothing is a lock, but I've always found myself very interested in the coins that are taking the time and the energy to focus on that utility. And then I would just add one more on, and that's liquidity. You could have a coin that's really valuable, but can you sell it when you want to sell it? And if you want to buy it, can you buy it? These prices are really volatile depending on liquidity. When there's not as many people exchanging the coin, then the price is way more susceptible to price fluctuations. So how fast does a coin transfer from one party to another? Liquidity is actually hard to overstate. So one additional factor to consider. Brad, I know both of us have kind of talked about different ones. I know I've spitballed and talked about things like XRP and XLM and XDC and some of these, and I have no idea what's going to happen with any of those. But it seems to me that like coins that have that ethos of let's focus on these utilities, let's focus on these relationships, they have a better chance than, meme coin that Jonathan invests in and turn around. And then, it goes up 10,000% and then it dunks 10,000% because, the whales are selling out. That's gambling. The other one is still speculative, but it is, it's more calculated. And maybe you would then have the courage to have a little bit more of a long-term buy and hold mindset than you would with, hey, I'm going to try and buy this low and sell it to a sucker that's going to buy it for more than I paid for it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of looking at this. And right, like for whatever research you've done, you have some conviction in those couple of things. And right, like who the heck knows? They might not exist 10 years from now. There's a decent probability of that, or they could be the one that wins. But if you're looking at it as a 1% bet, like if you told me you took 1 or 2% of your net worth and put it in there because you have a strong conviction based on the 50 hours of research that you've done and the way that you see the world and this regulation you see coming, okay, I couldn't fault you for that, because who knows? Like, what is the potential upside of that? It could be significant. If you told me you put 50% of your net worth in there, I might consider there might be some issues going on. And,
Jonathan, do you need to talk to someone? Is that dude, did you see me get $10,000 return on meme coin last week? I can't lose, dude. I can't lose.
Have you internalized the lessons of Visa buying? So, just like always, we don't give investing advice here, but that's what you've done your research on, and as I get more comfortable talking about the things that I'm looking into, I'll spread the word certainly, but yeah, for me it's always utility. Is there some real world value of this? Are there ways that some of these new technologies are helping people in the world, right? Solve problems, solve that friction that exists for, like you said, remittances that people send back to their families, or entire continents that are behind on technology and can just skip over our last 30 years of fumbling. Yeah. Right? Like that, to me, that's interesting. And there are some of these cryptos that are trying to do that in a very systematic way, and the opposite of this ridiculous pump and dump, wait for Elon to tweet type thing. And, those are the kind of things that I'm keeping my eye on. And I think, again, this doesn't mean I'm all in on this, and it doesn't mean that I'm not skeptical. I think it's the opposite. It means I'm keeping my mind open, just like I always do. And I'm trying to learn. And I'm willing to change my mind when it reaches that critical mass. And I find, again, I sound like a broken record, but I find that exciting. I find that exhilarating to know that maybe I'm a little less wrong than I was yesterday. The world is constantly changing on us. And, just learning something new means, it doesn't mean it invalidates your thoughts or your pre-standing convictions or whatever. It just means you're a little less wrong than you were before. So yeah, good stuff all around. Jonathan, this was your idea for an episode, and I really enjoyed it.
It was scary to tackle this one, right? It's like, for both of us, we would both acknowledge this is outside of our comfort zone. It's something that we personally, which, is the kind of the basis for everything that we've done, right? We personally explore these, and as we build familiarity, we talk about it, but it's top of mind. So thank you for being willing to kind of go here and participate in this conversation with me. I think hopefully it'll be a value add for our audience as well, and kind of give them a flavor for how to interact with us. So, all right, my friends, thank you for listening to this episode, and the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
If this episode was helpful to you, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends about us. We can be found on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. While you're there, don't forget to check out our other shows like Everyday Courage with Julian Johnsrud and Rebel Entrepreneur with Alan Downigan. If you would like a free bite-sized course to jumpstart your financial independence, check out Choosify.com/challenge. Choosify is produced by Andrew Mendonca and Zachary Tan and is a production of Choosify Media Incorporated. Choosify.com is managed by Annie Sheely with William McVeigh, M.K. Williams, Melissa Lagerquist, Liz Kessler, Stephen Heptig, Kelly Black, and Jennifer Ma. And Ed T is our CEO. Thanks for listening.